Welcome to CropCast, a series of monthly arable podcasts bringing you the latest information, timely updates and expert advice. In today's episode,
yield's really important. If you take my figures for 26 and if you say, right, it's 8.5 tonne rather than 9.5 tonne, your cost of production is 157 and your margin's 18 quid. But if it's 10.5 tonne, it's £127 and a £48 margin. So it starts to make a big difference. If you look at the production costs, the cost of production, more than 50% of the cost of production is based on your overheads and not on the variable costs.
I'm George Chalmers. In this episode, I'll be talking to David Ross, who's a principal consultant with SAC Consultant. And we're going to be looking at the cost of production and margins considering the year that's just been and polishing our crystal balls to look at the year ahead. Welcome along, David.
Thanks, George, for inviting me today.
David, can we just start with you giving our listeners a little background to yourself?
So I'm a principal consultant, as you said, for SAC Consultant. I'm based in Stonehaven, and I work with clients up and down the sort of eastern coast from Aberdeen down to sort of Dundee. Do a bit of agronomy for my clients, and my interests are really in sustainable kind of arable production and trying to build systems that work for farms. I've got an interest in soil health and been involved a bit in sort of regenerative agriculture and trying to use those principles to build into modern arable enterprises. So.
And right, we both work for SAC, we're both consultants. Like many, I tend to do a bit of everything. But as time has gone on, you've specialised more in crops and arable. What was the appeal of that sector for you?
That's a good question. I've kind of fallen into that a little bit, if I'm honest. It's I suppose it's partly due to the area that we're in. I mean, as I said, based in Stonehaven, and the area south of here is one of the most kind of productive areas that there is in Scotland. Probably some nice soils that is able to produce some really good crops, and there was a demand for our client base to do some more independent agronomy and provide that kind of sort of independent advice to them, and it's just sort of built from there. I've then I did my basis and my facts like a lot of us have done in the organisation, and then as demand has come along, we've kind of built my base of clients that I work with. But I've always kind of had an interest in it, and I always kind of enjoyed the numbers and trying to see what we're doing on farm and what our spend is in chemical or fertilizer, how that feeds through to the economics of producing the crop and hopefully giving a good margin for our clients.
Yes, it's fair to say there that you do more than just walk crops. You like looking at the soil, thinking of the bigger picture, and also looking at the nitty-gritty when it comes to numbers.
Yeah, I think nowadays the days of just being an agronomist and kind of looking at the crop are fading a little bit. There's so many different things that we need to try and look at to make it work, and it's tweaking and it might be tweaking the crop nutrition, or it might be trying to improve soils over a long term that then allows us to make the job more efficient and improve the farm as well as given efficient, can give a margin to the client at the end of the day. So,
yeah. So thinking back to 2025, the year it's been, one thing, I suppose, if we just kind of set the scene a wee bit, one thing that kind of sticks out was weather, how that impacted things.
Yeah, so thankfully, 2 seasons are never the same. And so sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look back at 2025, with one of the driest seasons that we have seen in a very, very long time. I mean, I keep a note of the weather myself, and normally would be somewhere between 750 and 800 mil of rain in my part of the world, and I think we ended up a year at 660 or something like that, and that was because of a bit of a flush of rain through the kind of November, December time in the year. The actual main growing season was particularly dry, and it's the first time I would say, I mean, I've been crop walking for, I don't know, 10, 12, 14 years, something like that. It's the first year I've really seen crops really start to suffer on some of the lighter land, like winter wheat, which is normally pretty resilient. It's rooted pretty well, and we've got to remember that I was in the back of a really good establishment in the tail end of 24. So these crops had rooted really well, and in certain, maybe just on the ever so slightly lighter land, they were just starting to struggle. And then about a fortnight later, we ended up with some rain. If it had just been a fortnight quicker, it would have been a different story. But I mean, we also had a season that was significantly higher in temperature. I mean, the news has said that we're 1.5 degrees overall warmer in our climate in 25 compared to the previous year. I have a weather station, and it would record the same. It's saying it's 1.5 degrees higher on average in 25 than it was in 24.
Yeah.
But I think the main thing, if you look at the sunlight that we had, the level of sunlight that there was in May, I think that is the thing that really gave us the crops that, I mean, we had some cracking wheat crops, exceptional wheat crops. Half a ton above the 5-year average, easy in some places. Yeah. And that was based on, I think it was based on being a bit warmer, and that sunlight through May and into June really allowed the crop to fulfill its potential, which was really good. I mean, winter barley as well, we said some outstanding crops of winter barley, and even spring barley did exceptionally well considering the conditions that it really went through. It didn't look very exciting. It depended whether it managed to grab a bit of rain or not, depending on which part of the country it was in.
Overall, kind of the general consensus is it's better than we thought it would be. In terms of yield, perhaps less so in quality with the spring barley and definitely price. But we'd bumper yield for other crops, and that was the same. I mean, we'll allude to that later, but there were definitely some star performers, folk claiming record yields. It was great to hear that from farmers and clients.
It was really refreshing on a year when we thought things would struggle, that actually, and it just shows us, George, that, and we can put as much effort into fertilizer and as much effort into the agronomy of the crop, but at the end of the day, if the sun shines and it shines at the right time and we've got plenty of it, then it gives us a crop at the end of the day.
And that's what I think when you're dealing with farmers and that if something has gone right, whether it's a price, whether it's a yield, whether it's a quality, it puts a smile on the face.
Yeah.
They've just got that one thing they had on to, and last year yields, they were great. Yeah, and I know spring barley. You'll have been the same, walking through crops in June and not looking at particularly good crops in June. By August, wow, it just totally transformed, and by the time it was in the shed, it was not what you expected.
Yeah, I think, and I mean, quality was a thing that just let spring barley down. I mean, yields were pretty good in most areas, but would be amiss if we didn't mention the quality issues that there was. But luckily, if people managed to get that crop dressed in some cases, and managed to get not only a reasonable price for their malt and barley, but they also got a decent price for their seconds as well that went that went away. So it earlier in the season, at harvest time, when there was a lot of screening issues, I was thinking it was going to be a really poor year because the screenings weren't going to find a home at a reasonable price. But actually, well, certainly in Aberdeenshire, they managed to find a home at a reasonable price, which brings when you look at the gross margin, brings an added element to it that didn't look as though it was going to be there at the time. So
if we turn around now to the numbers for 2025 harvest, it's fair to say that you've been involved with looking at cost of production for farmers for a number of years, really, in your area.
Yeah, so for the last, I don't know, maybe 8 years, maybe something like that, we have been part of a project, and then it's kind of gone independent a little bit after that, looking at using AHDB's Farmbench program. So it's been developed by HDB. There was old spreadsheets that was used for working out the cost of production. And Julie Clark from AHDB and our team have developed the Farmbench program to be able to be used by farmers. And it gives a basis to working out your cost of production, gives a kind of structure as to how you split out your costs, and is able, by putting your information in, is then able to give you some idea of what your cost of production is on a hectare basis, and then on a pounds per tonne basis as well. So you then can benchmark your figures against it. So the way it splits the numbers up, it gives you your top 25 and your middle 50%, and then your bottom 25. And it allows you to compare how your enterprises are looking against these other farms, and that's done on a net margin basis. So the top 25 and middle 50 and bottom 25 is on the best net margin. So you can compare it. There is your own personal figures. You can see your rent and finance figures, but when you're comparing with your neighbours and when you're benchmarking, the rent and finance is taken out of the equation to give you a little bit of anonymity within the figures. So, like I say, we've been involved with it for a number of years and found it's a pretty good system to be able to use. It takes a little bit of time to put your numbers in, especially in the first year, till you just find your way around it and figure out how you're going to split things up. But then once you're into it for a few years, it becomes a lot simpler. And the good thing is it gives you a cost of production per tonne that you can have in your head. So when you go to market grain, you have an idea of what your actual cost of production is.
So looking in at 2025 in a wee bit more detail, what were some of the things you were seeing?
So I've asked Julie Clark of HDB to give me some of the figures for 2025. So we have to remember there's a few things just to put this into context a little bit, is that the 2025 figures are not all in Farmbench at the moment because they're working their way through the winter programme of getting these figures in to see how till they see what the total we see all the numbers look like. It is probably the slightly more engaged farmers that are involved with these benchmarking as well. So that might mean that the figures might be a bit better than they are generally. So I wouldn't take them as an overall benchmark of Scottish production, but it gives us a bit of a snapshot as to how they look. So if you take a crop, I'm gonna look at the 2025, so the middle 50%, so not the top 25, just to give us a bit of an idea of what things are looking like. So we spoke a little bit earlier about yield. So this is looking at first wheat and first wheats only. Yield was exceptional in 2025 so far. So the yield was around 10.31 tonne to the hectare, which is very, very good. And then price so far is £203 a tonne. So that, again, is probably a bit higher than you can get at the moment, but with a bit of forward selling, that looks like the price that it is at the minute. So there's also a little bit of income for straw and other environmental schemes that Farmbench takes into account. So you get a total income of £1,981 a hectare from your first wheat. And then if you look at variable costs, the seed is around £78 a hectare, fertiliser about £284, and your crop protection is about £191 a hectare. And then there's some other costs in there, comes to another £21. So your total variable costs per hectare is about £575 a hectare. So yeah, biggest chunk of that's coming out your fertiliser, and then your chemical spend is your second biggest in that sector. And then Farmbench looks at the overhead costs as well. So it takes labour, both paid and unpaid. So if you have a member of staff working for you, his or her salary or wage goes into that pot, and then it takes 30,000 as a sort of nominal fee for each partner that's involved in the business on a proportional basis. So that comes to about £168 a hectare. Machinery and equipment, so fuel and depreciation and all this kind of stuff, repairs, comes to £340 a hectare. Property and energy costs £111, and administration costs another £55. So your total overheads for your wheat is £673. So a big chunk of the spend on growing that crop is actually on your own fixed cost. So total cost of production then for a hectare of wheat, £1,248. Net margin, £733 per hectare. So that was given a total cost of production of £121 a tonne, and your margin per tonne was 82. So a decent margin per tonne, but based on a very good yield and a decent sale price for the way the market is at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, I think one thing, and I've heard you give these type of presentations before. One thing that always comes through that yield's king. Basically, if you've got the yield, that's a great starting point.
Yeah, it does make a big difference. To get in, and if you were looking at the gross margin, then it makes a big difference in trying to get that crop to be profitable for you. If you look at the overall profitability, and we'll maybe cover this a little bit later, it's just about overheads is a big chunk of that cost as well. So it's actually, if you look on wheat, the overheads is a bigger proportion of the spend than what the actual variable cost is in growing the crop.
And then, of course, there's other crops that's recorded. Moving on to Oilseed Rape, one or two surprises there, perhaps?
Yeah, so Oilseed Rape is the one that is probably the star of the show for 2025. So the surprising, generally yields were pretty good in my part of the world. There were a lot of people hitting the sort of 5 ton plus.
That 5 ton is, I think it's been somewhat of an aspirational yield, but this year, certainly up in our corner, up in Buchan, Banff and Buchan, it's pretty common, to be quite honest with you. And
yeah, you're dead right, George. It's been the number we've been trying to hit for a wee while, and it did. The figures from Farmbench for 25 so far is just showing a bit shy of that. So the overall yield was 4.56 tonne to the hectare, but the price was pretty good. So with the bonuses on, about £432 a tonne. So probably is just about as strong a price as we've seen for oilseed rape for the last number of years. So that gives, there's a little bit of sales, well, not so much straw, but environmental income, other bits and pieces, comes to £1,977 for your hectare of output from your oilseed rape. So variable costs, again, so far, seeds about £88 a hectare, fertiliser 313, crop protection 157, and other bits and pieces is £15 a hectare. So total variable cost comes to about £574 a hectare. And then again, overheads, same basis as before. Labour is about £200 a hectare, machinery about £320, property and energy about £97, admin about £61. So your overall overheads was £677. So cost of production £1,251, net margin about £726. So the cost of production per tonne is £275 a tonne, which, given it by far the best margin, £157 a tonne of margin. It's just a pity that rape only yields 4.5 tonne to the hectare rather than 10 tonne like wheat, or else it would be a slightly different story.
Yeah, but that just lets you see when you do get, well, it's the same with the wheat, I suppose, but when you do get that yield, it makes a big difference.
Yeah. It's a sunshine crop. It gets the sun in its back, and it yields on the back of that. And what we have to remember is these crops all got really well established in the tail end of 24. So there was no washed out bits. There was every end rig was fine. The crop didn't get really held back much through the winter by any kind. There wasn't much snow. There wasn't really that cold a winter, and it came out in the spring and just got up and got going and never stopped really.
I think as well, the thing I'm kind of taking from this is that you're looking at two crops that they're almost identical in terms of cost of production per hectare. They ain't cheap to grow. When you look at it like that, you need to make sure, though, that you can get them well established to give yourself the best chance.
Yeah.
I know also, right, that there can be club root issues and such like. Getting that yield makes such a difference for them.
Yeah, I think it's consistency. It's trying to get the crop nice and consistent coming into spring. We've got the other thing we've got to remember is that the way the weather is in the 25 season, crops were running 10 days to a fortnight earlier in growth stage and development than, well, that's as early as I think, again, I've ever seen them. I've never been as early as that. They're usually round about maybe a day here and there, but not a week or 10 days earlier than they should have been.
Yeah, I know certainly crop walking, our last recommendations usually go out just after a Highland show, but I think we're kind of all done and dusted by about the 10th of June. It just seemed very strange
season, and for us as agronomists, we were flipping running about the countryside trying to keep up with crops because they were just growing so quickly. They're just
getting ahead of us. So let's just look at winter wheat and oilseed rape. If we now move over to barley and spring barley in particular, it was a bit more of a mixed bag this year.
Yeah, I mean, as we mentioned before, yields were actually pretty good, or better than we anticipated. Let's put it that way. As the season went through, the disappointing bit was the quality, and that fed through to the price that the farmer got at the end of the day for their crop. So, we've got some figures just on spring malting barley. So this is crops that were grown for malting barley. They didn't necessarily all weren't always sold for malting barley, but so the yield for 2025 so far is 6.69 tonne to the hectare. So, maybe just slightly below for where we would hope to be, but still decent for the season that we had. And the price so far is in at £168 a tonne. So, probably a chunk of feed in there as well as some molting to give us that kind of price. And a little bit of, like I say, a bit of straw and a bit of environmental scheme stuff. So the overall income is 1,178. If you look at the variable costs, seed higher cost within £106 a hectare, fertiliser 244, crop protection 81, and other bits and pieces £17 a tonne. So total variable cost comes out at 447. And then overheads that's put on there, labour is 166, machinery and equipment 258, property and energy costs 84, admin costs 55. So the total overheads is £564, giving a total cost of production of 1011 and a net margin of 167 per hectare, and a total cost of production of £151 per tonne. And the margin, with being sold at 168, the margin is £17 a tonne.
Okay, but that, when you're looking at Farmbench, there's one or two things excluded from that.
Yeah, so that, when we say the cost of production is 151, that is not including rent and finance. So a typical rent and finance figure could be somewhere between £100 and £200 a hectare. Would you say somewhere thereabouts?
Yeah, could easily be.
Yeah. So that basically wipes out the margin, or it pays for the margin, or the margin, pays for the rent and finance, and we're left with a bit of a negative at the end of the day.
Yeah. But have to add back in the way that BPS is excluded.
Yes, there's nothing in. This is all these figures that I mentioned today don't include any basic payment scheme, and any environmental scheme that there is in there is associated with the crop rather than anything else. So just be mindful of that. It doesn't include BPS or rent and finance in the figure.
So overall, it was a lot. Well, you could well be approaching negative territory there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say there's none of the crops that you would say there would have been a significant margin. Even oilseed rape, it was good, but if you started to add in a bit of rent and finance into that, then it's probably negative. It's probably negative as well. So,
and winter barleys, just briefly, what were your thoughts on them?
So winter barleys, again, it's one of those crops that either some people love or some people absolutely hate. Yield for 2025 so far is 8.27, and the price is about £152 a tonne. So that'll be pretty much all sold for feed. It's always been one of the crops that's had a poorer margin. So total income for that crop's about £1,309 per hectare. Seed costs about 93, fertiliser 284, crop protection about 135, other variable costs about £10, so 522. And then if you think about labour and other things, it's labour's 166, machinery and equipment 275, property and energy costs 99, admin 36, so another 575 of overhead costs to go on top of that. So the cost of production is 1,097 and net margin 212, with a cost of production per tonne of 133. So roughly £20 a margin on that crop. But I mean, the good thing with winter barley is that it's a kind of crop it's an enabling crop. It allows us to do other things. We can in my part of the world, the guys that grow bulbs, they like to get winter barley in first, get it off, and they can get their bulbs in, or it lets us get rape in, or it lets us put a cover crop in, meet the EFA greening rules, and get a decent cover crop to carry through the winter. So, although we have to be mindful of the economics of these crops, sometimes winter barley would be the one that's maybe there for other logistical reasons, and it gets a good chunk of harvest out of the way when the weather tends to be a bit better, and lets folk get a start. So,
yeah, and you've obviously been doing this for a number of years. 2025, it had its own set of challenges in terms of the weather, very, very dry. Have you seen any variations from between types of farm? So is there some types of farms done better than others? So perhaps those that are mostly cereals compared to those that maybe a bit more mixed?
Yeah, I think we certainly saw it in 25 with the drier sort of season. The farms that had either had a bit of grass in a rotation or were rotationally putting on muck or digestate or something or fibre or compost, it seems to have made a difference to them, and that the water holding capacity, just we having that bit extra organic matter and maybe the organic matter cycling a bit better within the soil, it's been able to hold on to water and keep a crop going, keep the legs on it through the season. Whereas some of the farms, the more all arable places that have been cropped for a number of years, maybe rotations maybe not as good as it perhaps could be, that they were just toiling a bit, that you could see the crops just starting to go off maybe a little bit earlier than some of the other farms. But you certainly saw a difference in soil type. The heavy, I mean, I have some fairly heavy land in round about Lawrencekirk, and you hardly saw the crop suffering, but on the periphery of that, where it just tended to be a little bit lighter, then you started to see it going off. And then some of the bits on the coast that was getting maybe a bit of sea har or just maybe a little bit cooler, they tended to be a little bit better as well. So definitely saw a difference in 25 season.
You've been doing a wee bit of thinking about 2026 and the potential margins.
I thought I would try and have a little bit of a cast forward and look and see what 26 could potentially look like financially. So what I did is I've taken a combination of some of the data that's come from Farmbench, so looked at sort of 5-year averages for yields and put a bit of an estimate in for what the price per tonne is, and then went through the costs individually and tried to sort of think about what the increase or whether there would be a change for the 2026 season. So,
in terms of variable costs, what have you been hearing in terms of any uplifts or any reductions?
So, from what I can see, seed-wise, there's maybe not just a huge difference. It's definitely a year to be thinking about home saving seed if you can, and just try and reduce cost a little bit that way. Just make sure you get it tested and are happy with the quality that you've got. But just trying to cut down a little bit of cost in there. As far as fertilizer goes, quite dependent on when it was bought, but I was having a look for wheat, and I think it's up somewhere around about the 8% for a wheat programme in 25 versus a wheat programme in 26. So it looks like it's up a little bit. Yeah, there'll be some things will go up in price and some will go down. I think there is a bit of a battle between the distributors and the chemical companies at the moment, just to try and figure out exactly what that's going to look like. But I've put 5% on for that. I actually think the difference between 24 and 25 maybe wasn't that big a difference, because 25 there was quite a few chemicals actually came down in price. So I've put plus 5% on there. So that gives an overall increase of about 5.5% on variable costs.
And our fixed costs, it'd be fair to say that you're seeing them creeping up as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've put some figures against that as well. So just take labour, for example, the just the difference in the national minimum wage and the changes in NI is putting another 8.5% onto that cost. So that is something that is becoming, it's just creeping up all the time. Machinery and equipment, there's nothing that you seem to buy as a spare part and actually think that it was good value for money at the moment. It just seems to always be on the upside. So I put an extra 10% on there. A little bit on property and energy. I mean, energy costs is maybe coming back slightly in this year, but we've got to remember that we maybe didn't use quite so much fuel in 25 either, just because there wasn't the same level of drying. And then we've got admin costs in there 5%, so probably another 8.5% probably up in overheads for the coming year. So if you take the wheat example again, our total cost of production would increase to around £1,338. Net margin of 445. So cost of production's about 141 for this coming season. That's up 20 quid on 2025, but with a good year, probably exceptional yield in 2025. So
it's important to add that the yield you're using is a 5-year average yield.
Yes. Yeah.
As opposed to the same yield as.
So it didn't. It would be unjust to base it on last year when we had so good year. So I tried to average that out a bit.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah.
So I mean, the margin's being squeezed a bit within that. I had put in wheat at £175 a tonne. I think you can still just about get that for November 26 at the moment. But it's just very dependent on what happens with that, and what happens in the market in the next few months.
Yeah, and that in terms of a margin per tonne, that's really closed the gap.
Well, yeah, I mean that's going for a margin in 25 at £82 £82 a tonne to one in 26 at £34 a tonne. Yeah. And yield's really important. If you take my figures for 26 and if you say, right, it's 8.5 tonne rather than 9.5 tonne, your cost of production's 157 and your margin's 18 quid. And then if it's 10.5 tonne, it's £127 and a £48 margin. So it starts to make a big difference as you.
Yes, absolutely. Looking at some of the other crops that will be going in the ground.
Well, if we speak a little bit about, we'll go back to oilseed rape and we'll leave our favourite of spring barley until last. So if you take 5-year average yield for winter oilseed rape, it's just over 4 tonne, 4.01 tonne, according to the data that's in Farmbench for Scotland. And I've put the price in at £390 a tonne. I'm maybe just slightly shy of that, but it would be around that £390, £400 based on the numbers we're seeing at the moment. So seed, again, not a huge change. Fertiliser up about 5% to £329 a hectare. Crop protection, same 5%. So overall, over all the costs, we're saying over all the variable costs, a lift about 4%. And then again, same basis for the overheads as I've used before. So just the same percentage uplifts. So the total cost of production for oilseed rape's looking about £1,332 a hectare. Net margin of 239. So a total cost of production per tonne of 332 and a margin per tonne of £58 a tonne. So that margin is being squeezed from 25 due to the decrease in price. So £40 a decrease in price and half a tonne. And this is where on a relatively low yielding, high value crop, the half a ton makes a big difference to the overall numbers of what it looks like. So
you really see that there.
Yeah, so the cost of production, like I said, was 332 at 4 ton. If it goes to 4.5 ton, it's 296 and a margin of 96. Yeah. And if it goes to 5 ton, it's a cost of production of 266 and a margin of 124. So it does make a big difference in that scenario.
Yeah, I think there's an important thing here, because when things are a wee bit more challenging, folk can sometimes be tempted to not spend as much, maybe not quite, or be unwilling to spend. It just shows that it's still worth looking after things. If something needs it needs to get it, just to make sure you're getting your optimum yield there.
Yeah, we've got to make sure that every pound we're spending, whether that be on fertilizer or on chemical, we're getting a return from. We need to maybe, there is lots of cases where things could possibly be trimmed a little bit, but we still need to have a robust program that is going to give us yield at the end of the day, because that is what pays the bills at the end of the day. And I mean, it's variable costs are what they are, and overheads or fixed costs, but you could actually argue that the two are the wrong way around, in that we need fertilizer and chemicals, and so they are actually kind of fixed costs a little bit. They're variable depending on the crop, but actually it's really, we need to get in about the overheads to actually try and strip out some cost out of them to make them worthwhile, make the overall economics of the job better.
Looking at spring barley.
Yeah, it's the really exciting crop for 2026. So
tinge of sarcasm there in your voice.
Yeah, so if you look at 5-year average for from Farmbench, it's actually a little bit higher than it was in 2025. So the yield was 6.69 in 2025. 2026 is 6.85. That's probably more like what we are seeing on the ground, I would say. And I've put a price in at 170. Been speaking to traders bits and pieces over the last couple of weeks, and actually getting a price for stuff that's not on a long-term contract at the moment is quite challenging. But there will be guys that's on a wheat futures plus contract, or a third and a third, or contract going forward. So I put in 170. I think the consensus was I wasn't a million miles away from the mark, hopefully, at that. With feed barley probably sitting hopefully around about the 150 mark on the back of that. So if you look at variable costs, again, this is looking at a spring barley program. The increase is about 11% of an increase. Crop protection 5%. So overall a plus 7% increase on the crop. And again, same overheads as I've done before, same percentages. So the cost of production was £1,089 for spring barley. Net margin 137. Cost of production per tonne is 159, and a net margin of £11 a tonne. So last year it was 17. So comparable, maybe slightly tighter than it was the year before.
Wasn't it great last year, and it's it's looking worse the year ahead, basically.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't look any better at the moment, anyway. No. Whether our fortunes turn with us between now and harvest time, we'll have to wait and see what happens. So
yeah. It's one of those years, and you'll be finding this as well. Farmers are asking, there's a lot of people speaking about spring barley contracts, or perhaps lack of them. Maybe is a thing they're speaking about. Farmers are scratching their heads and they're saying, "Oh, what do I do? Or what should I be doing?"
Yeah, I mean it's a really difficult thing to try and change. I mean, and especially in your part of the world, George, a lot of guys are geared up for spring barley. It's what their main crop is, and they might need the straw for their other enterprises on the farm as well. So the 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 barley is nearly a byproduct. I don't really like saying that, but it's nearly a byproduct to trying to keep the rest of the enterprises going on the farm. But I mean, there is a few alternatives that people could look at. I mean, legumes and pulses, peas and beans are beginning to grow a bit in popularity. People are starting to look for a source of homegrown protein, try and save buying in soya or other proteins for their livestock. So, and there's some decent varieties that yield and are able to be grown in Scotland and certainly in more in the north as well. I mean, I've had peas and beans. Well, beans and we tried some combining peas this last year, and they actually worked pretty well. They've done well. Okay with the dry season, and we managed to get them combined in good time. And they've yielded well, and the gross margin looks good. So they've been a success. So there is options. We've got some changes in the greening rules as well for this next season. We'll be looking for an increase for 2027 up to 7% EFA. So there is some options in there that maybe they follow with some kind of sort of green manure crop through the summer. If there's any fields, my thinking would be if there's any fields that are struggling or maybe just need a rest or just not performed as well as you thought that they might be the ones to maybe put into fallow and put a green manure, put something back into the soil. And then
maybe a chance to reset a rotation there as well.
Yeah, that's right. If things, I mean, we've had a couple of good establishment seasons in 24 and 25, but previous to that, we had a couple of disasters where rotations had to be changed and things have got a little bit out of kilter maybe than we would like. So a chance to follow a bit, put in a green manure, put in a crop of wheat in good time, get it established well in the next season, and give that soil a rest, allow it to have a different root in it for a wee while, and get some green matter back into it. It's been involved with some research work lately that's been looking at that, and there's some really encouraging results coming from putting in a green manure and then growing a winter crop of wheat on the back of it.
Yeah, and there's also opportunities like EECs. You know that green manure option through EECs as well.
Yeah. This might be a year to think about putting if you've not thought about putting an EECs or in an agri-environment scheme in, it might be a year worth punting in an application and taking a bit of risk out of the cropping situation for a couple of years by putting some of these green manures or overwintered stubbles in. Okay, there's a timing gap with that because it would be another year before you could start it, but certainly the economics of spring barley, all indications, and I don't want to be a doomsayer, but all indications is that it's not looking particularly rosy for the next couple of years. So,
and there's other options as well, such as renting out for patates or
yeah. I mean,
depends on your area, of course.
Yeah, and it depends on the area, but I mean, we've got quite a lot of guys that are renting out tatty land and have just put an extra field in for tatties this year just to try and help that, or we've got vine and peas and things like that, vine and beans in some areas that there's that as well. And I mean, folk have already reacted to this, because if you look at the AHDB early bird survey on what has been planted, oilseed rape areas, and this is UK wide, this is not just in Scotland, but oilseed rape's up 30% compared to 2025. So it's 2025 harvest versus the prediction for 2026 is up 30%. So folk are already reacting. They were already trying to put in as much winter crop as they could and go for there. So.
And I know one thing that's often said as well that but if I cut back my acres, that's going to impact on my overheads. I've still to find the money to pay my overheads.
Yeah, and it is a really valid point in that unless you're using contractors or a lot of your production is based on the use of contractors, which you can just switch on or off.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to say as well, that every farm's different. There's no one brush does all.
No, it is the thing. Everybody is geared up ever so slightly different. But if you are in a position where you could switch off or not pay for a lot of your overheads in this next year, then that is probably something to think about and do it that way. If you are geared up, I mean, we've put overheads into all these costings that we've put, and okay, the margin is not very small at the end of it, but it has covered a big chunk of your overheads within that. Yeah. But yes, so just because you don't grow the crop, depending on how it works, you might actually be worse off because your overheads haven't been covered by the margin from the spring barley. Yeah. But the other thing you should say there is that if you look at the production costs, more than 50% of a lot of crops, the cost of production, more than 50% of the cost of production is based on your overheads and not on the variable costs, right? So that if you want to have a go at trying to attack something and make your business far more efficient, I know it's difficult because it's not easy and people like to have pieces of kit and probably as much kit as they need or more. But by attacking that fixed cost is where you will have by far the biggest impact on your business. Yeah, and try to keep it as simple as you possibly can.
I mean, it's also important to say that it's very easy just to say, right, okay, you don't grow a 50 acre or something like that. You cut the crops back by that, and it means you've got more, have more overhead costs. But the end of the day, you rest in that ground. It can help your rotation. It can mean you're establishing crops better. You could, you have to kind of look at things over a number of years sometimes.
Correct. And I mean, it's where it's important to look at the overall profitability of the rotation as well, not just individual crops that's within that. But you definitely, there's lots of other reasons for doing things rather than it all being financial as well. So, but we definitely need to have an eye on the numbers and make sure.
Yeah, and I suppose that brings us back to you doing your farm bench with your farmers. What's your key messages to people that are listening in?
So, I mean the key things is really try and work out your cost of production. Farmbench is there as a tool to be able to use. It's one way of doing it. It's not the be all and end all, but it gives you the ability to benchmark benchmark against other businesses, which is a great way of trying to understand your costs, because people then start asking questions as to how they manage to get a lower figure and what they do, and it builds a lot of good a good dialogue around about the different, or understanding around about the costs. So I would certainly think about doing that. There is lots of stuff in our business that we can't control. So we can't control the price. We can't control whether the sun's going to shine. We can't control what kind of yield we're going to get at the end of the day. But there's lots of things within your own business that you can control. So taking control of the controllable is really one of the things that I would highlight. Look at trying to strip out that fixed cost if you can, or trying to find another something a little bit different, or another crop or another enterprise in the business that just allows you to give you a little bit of freedom or a little bit of financial freedom within it. Once you've done your cost of production, got an idea, if there is a margin in that crop, should you start thinking about selling a bit now? Get a sale on the board, see what the price is going to be, and if it's a worse price that you get for the whole season, then that's probably it's not a bad place to be. At least you've made a start. And I mean, there's lots of data that shows on selling strategies and marketing strategies, and I think trying to have a way that works for you and sticking to it works is good. And then, like we said, just try and think about spring barley and maybe what some of the alternatives that you could think about. So, a legume crop, intercropping with oats and barley, and using it to feed livestock. EFA options, or trying to rent it out to a third party for tatties or for other crops. Again, could be carrots or cabbage or whatever. Just trying to give just try and reduce the risk, help improve the risk that there is on spring barley for the coming year.
Thanks a lot, David. You've given us a lot of food for thought there. And hopefully, everything turns out a lot better than you're predicting.
Yeah, we can only hope. I mean, hopefully we've a good season this year. We've certainly had a bit of snow in the last couple of weeks, which means we might have had a bit of proper winter for a change. So hopefully that leads on to a good spring, and all the water reserves have got topped back up again to allow us to grow a good crop for 2026.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, David.
No problem. Thanks, George.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of CropCast. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe or follow. If you want to find more about anything we've discussed on this show, or you'd like to get in touch, you can find all our details in the show notes. We look forward to seeing you again on our next episode of CropCast. This episode was hosted by George Chalmers, produced by George Gauley, and edited by Cameron Waugh. The podcast was produced in association with the Scottish Government.
The Farm Advisory Service Podcast. Audio advice on livestock, crops and soils, environment, rural business, and more. Brought to you in association with the Scottish Government.